All right, hey y'all, it's me, it's Simon. So this video that we're about to look at here together is a shorter clip from a longer interview with Stephen and Emily, and I'm mostly trying to figure out how they think about the value that exists within a data organization, how we like unlock that and can distribute it elsewhere within the org, because that's kind of a big problem that I think a lot of data organizations, data divisions are facing right now. And as always, they super deliver. So here it is. This is a little chunk of this. It's sort of how a data organization can communicate and can find value within the larger organization. I think you're going to like
About
it.
what it means for sort of a data team, a data collection, a data division to like operate successfully within the bigger organization, right? Especially as folks who have sort of both worked inside and sort of outside of what you think of as like the traditional data org. Like how do you think this is done really well? Like how is value communicated outside of that org? Um, how do you see people like failing to find great success in that space?
Yeah, so one thing I think a lot about, we have a data channel in Slack, and occasionally rather than opening our BI tool and like searching for a chart, people just ask in the data channel like, hey, does this exist, or does anything like this exist? And I think that there's a like education slash democratization slash awareness piece, that like you want to build a muscle in people that like, hey, I want data to make this decision,
Mm-hmm.
because they've been working without it to some point. So the first piece is, oh, I want additional information to make this decision. And then the next piece is like knowing where to go. And that's that movement from like posting in a Slack channel to knowing to search in the BI tool. That's one
Yeah,
piece of the puzzle.
totally. We have a similar phenomenon, which I don't think is surprising, but one of the biggest improvements in this that I think has helped the most for us over the last year is we built out what we call our data golden path. So there's a series of stages, basically 5 levels, that is a course in data at level 1 and then Zapier data at later levels. And being able to take the people most likely to come to the data channel to ask those questions and say, hey, if you take this golden path set of courses, you will be able to answer these yourself, I promise, is super powerful. It
Mm-hmm.
happened to me yesterday where someone came in and was asking a set of questions. They're brand new, they haven't seen this material yet. They're asking extremely smart questions about data at Zapier. And I answered the first 2 because they took 1 minute each. And then when she asked something more difficult, I said, hey, we have this golden path. You're the type of person who's clearly going to benefit from it. Dedicate a day or 2 of your onboarding time to going through that, and it will pay back dividends over time for sure.
Yeah.
And that has been extremely powerful. So we have plans actually to make that even get a little bit deeper. And as I mentioned earlier, I think having a power user that's done that material who you can count on in every team in the organization just is so amazing for the data team. And that golden path has probably been our biggest success down that road in the last 2 or 3 years.
Can you share what those other levels are?
I don't remember exactly offhand. They're documented. I don't remember which pieces we split out, but essentially it starts with sort of data concepts, some that are simple, correlation is not causation,
Yeah.
some that are much more complicated, like don't peek at your experiments. And so those are in different levels of the golden path and sort of the level of complexity. But then there are also just straight up lessons on here's this particular data set, the user's data set at Zapier, and here's how you ask questions about user data. And here is a second lesson on how you ask questions about usage data at Zapier. And those are in separate tables, separate explores and looker.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the most common questions that you might ask of each of those. And so for the primary 5 or so most used exploration features in Looker, we actually document, here's what these tables are. This is how you ask it questions. Here's how you do something slightly more complicated. And so then there are SQL lessons of if you want to go extra deep and you really want to be that power user and be able to explore stuff that hasn't been pre-baked for you.
Sure.
Intro to SQL, intro to Zapier table structure, and things like that. And then we actually have plans for levels 4 and 5, which are not totally baked yet, but will potentially even go so far as to be a leverage point for someone, say, who wants to transfer out of whatever part of the org they are in into the data team. That's a good way to get, an L1 or an L2 person inside of the data org, where we might be able to hire internally instead of externally. So I think that's a cool sort of long-term vision for that program. But I think that those first 3 or 4 levels that we already have have been super effective in building data usage and comfort outside of the data org at the company.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the goal of this education or advocacy isn't to eliminate questions, but to sort of improve them, right? Sort of start to have much more nuance and much more developed sort of conversations with your stakeholders.
That's totally correct. Both for 2 reasons. One, they can answer easy questions themselves. The canonical example of this, in my opinion, is how many signups did we get last week? That's like the most obvious question. It's one of the easiest to self-serve, and that question just shouldn't come to the data team. It's clear, you know that it's right, you know when it's wrong, you should be able to self-serve that. Mm-hmm. Then when you get questions on the data team, they are often more nuanced. They're actually places where people are blocked. I know that if one of my power users comes to the data team and says, hey, I don't know how to answer this question, that it's probably pretty hard and might not even be self-servable in Looker. And if that's the case, then you absolutely have to come to the data team and they will help you prioritize and work on that material, hopefully to make it self-servable in the future. But when we know who those people are, it's been really helpful. And we even, in our data triage, have started attaching the data golden path level of the person asking the question. Oh. And so we have very explicitly said that if you are in a later stage golden path, that we will prioritize your questions first with the assumption that they are better questions.
If I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that your power users throughout the org are doing all the reporting so that your decision science team can work on insights.
That's totally the goal. It's not 100%. Obviously, I don't think that'll ever be 100% true, but that is definitely what we are trying to influence in this behavior.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that split between sort of what you might think of as like data services and data products, I think, is a cause of a lot of sort of communication failures or consternation between a data org and the rest of the organization. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually, is how do you, as a member of the data organization, like how do I communicate the different like flavors of value that the organization is sort of generating? Because some are pretty obvious, right? And others, like data ops work, is most valuable when it's invisible, which is kind of tricky to talk about. And I wonder sort of what advice y'all might have for me.
It's hard. So the context that I would bring into this conversation is I help run our company-wide OKR process, and even setting goals for these support type organizations. So things like the data team in general, but data ops specifically, SRE, reliability engineers, QA engineering, all of those types of supporting functions are quite difficult to set business outcome focused key results for.
Right.
And so we, at least this year, have mostly tried to attach those supporting teams to the teams that are producing business outcome focused results, and say that if you are supporting those teams, you are tied to the success of those teams. You need to understand what you can do to help them work faster because they are shipping the results that matter for the business. But that can be a little bit demoralizing of my team's not doing something that matters for the business or something along those lines.
Right.
And so I definitely don't think that we have nailed this yet either, except to say that you need to have a focus on business outcome, customer outcomes. What are you doing right for your customer? And even as a member of the data org, you are working in support of the people who are delivering value for customers. And as good or as bad as your internal tooling is, if you are delivering great value for your customers and the teams that you are supporting are doing that, then you are succeeding.
Mm-hmm. Emilie, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think Stephen nailed it.
Yeah, it really got it.